And with us this morning to review the papers are broadcaster and journalist Thomas Copeland and anthropologist Marianne Ahota. Great to see you both. Thanks so much for joining us. Thomas, I think we're coming to you first. Front page of the Times, like many of the papers, speculating on this potential Brexit deal that we could see as soon as Monday.
It's the funny thing about Brexit, everything changes and yet nothing changes. Rishi Sunak's faced with a similar problem that all of his predecessors have tried and largely failed to resolve, dealing with the Northern Ireland Protocol, but some optimism. The front page of the Times, you can see it there, Brexit deal within days, talk in the Times and elsewhere of maybe Monday an agreement being announced, some frantic negotiations going on over the last couple of days and weeks. Substance, largely unknown. It's not very well reported in most of the papers. The Times are saying, quite a few of the papers are saying it could amount to all but scrapping most, if not all, of the checks between GB and Northern Ireland. A lot more responsibility being placed on the ports in GB to ensure the products that were going to Northern Ireland were not then passing through into the single market, into the Republic of Ireland, and hefty fines for those who don't obey those kind of new regulatory rules. UK control over stuff like VAT in Northern Ireland back, state policy, state aid policy back in the UK's hands, and a role for judges and the Assembly for issues to do with the European Court of Justice in Northern Ireland, which is a really big issue. But just like back in the days of Theresa May, the two big opponents, the two big challengers to Sunak here, the DUP, Unionist Party in Northern Ireland, and the ERG Eurosceptic Tories. Talking quite a lot of the papers, the Times is really running with a lot of this about, Boris Johnson potentially leading a bit of a vanguard in support of his Northern Ireland Protocol bill, which is a big way to just scrap the Northern Ireland Protocol in a much more substantive form than renegotiating it. His aides say that no, he's fully behind the government. The irony behind all of this, of course, is that the Northern Ireland Protocol was Boris Johnson's deal. It was part of his withdrawal agreement, and the ERG, after a Star Council meeting, swung in behind him at the time and left the DUP high and dry. At the moment, it looks like the ERG are saying, well, we're looking to the DUP and we'll do whatever they do. The big difference between this, of course, and 2019 is that unlike back in 2019 and early 2020, the ERG, Eurosceptic Tories, don't really have a reason to support Rishi Sunak on this. For most of the UK, Brexit is done. The Northern Ireland issue doesn't really affect voters in the same way that Brexit did back then. So they don't have much of a movement, and actually the DUP has quite a lot of support within unionism in Northern Ireland to maintain its position of maintaining or not having Stormont back up and running until the Northern Ireland Protocol is dealt with. That hasn't hurt them in the polls nearly as much as some people expected that it would. So Rishi Sunak seems optimistic. I'm a little less optimistic.
Okay, and Marianne, let's just bring you in on this. This is the front page of The Guardian as well today. And of course, there's no suggestion yet that Boris Johnson's going to back any new deal. Of course, this is politically very risky for Rishi Sunak if he faces a backbench rebellion, many saying this could be a defining moment in his premiership.
Yeah, I think, as Thomas points out, the specifics of what happens at the Northern Irish Republic of Irish border where it sits doesn't actually affect the people on the UK mainland's day-to-day lives unless they're involved in export or import of goods or services. However, what this becomes is a conversation around domestic politics, and it becomes a kind of a political game, if you will, where Boris Johnson has an opportunity to once again dominate conversations and arguments about who is actually in control. As Thomas points out, this is all about Boris Johnson's oven-ready deal. I mean, we have short memories. This was the thing that he went, oh yeah, it's totally fine. It obviously wasn't then. It continues to be the biggest thorn in the side of UK integrity in terms of our relationship with the Republic of Ireland specifically, the relationship between the parts of Ireland on the island of Ireland. This stuff is really important to get right. And Stormont isn't sitting. We have a Northern Irish Assembly that isn't functioning because people are not coming to the table. I think the problem is Rishi Sunak is in politically quite tricky a tricky set of circumstances, because the Tory party as a whole have their backs to the wall in terms of public opinion, in terms of the run-up to the next set of to the general election. It does appear that the writing is very clearly being written on the wall.
Yeah, I'm just going to jump in there, if I may, because we're a bit short of time. And that leads me neatly on to the next article, which we'd love to talk about as well, front page of the Eye, a new poll that shows that Sir Keir Starmer would be on course for a landslide victory in the next election. Thomas, just briefly, your thoughts on this, please.
Yeah, I mean, listen, pinch of salt and handful of salt. You'd be happy reading this as you were the Labour Party at the moment. Polls saying that they could be a 1997 style victory. In all policy areas, Labour doing well. Just to run through this very, very quickly, even the areas where Tories traditionally do well, the economy, crime, immigration, Labour all ahead. All of that said, it's still, could be a year and a half away to an election. Rishi Sunak has a little bit of time. I think he would have hoped to have done better by now. He's been in office in about 6 months. He would have wanted to start to move some of these polls, and they've proved rather sticky, and they haven't moved for him. He'll want to move them more, but he's got about a year and a half to do it. If he can get some good policy wins, if he can preside over some inadvertent, and would have happened anyway, recovery and in terms of inflation and cost of living, maybe solve some of these negotiations with public sector strike in unions, all of that means that there's still plenty of time, and the game's definitely not over. So listen, I mean, you're always happy, the Labour Party's happy probably this morning looking at these polls, but they certainly shouldn't be resting on their laurels.
Yeah, and a brief thought from you on that, if I may, Marianne, just on this poll that suggests that Labour would certainly have a landslide result if they were to have the next election now.
Yeah, as Thomas said, polls are cheap at this point in the electoral cycle. I think, I'm kind of heartened to think that Rishi Sunak has been spending his time trying to sort out the Northern Irish Protocol. It continues to be a real issue, and kind of how that then plays out into Brexit, how it plays out into our economic recovery more broadly from the pandemic, recovering from the shocks of war, and bottom line, preparing and mitigating for the shocks that are to come, because I think this is the nature of our economic interconnected global system. I mean, the guest you had just before us was talking about cross transmission of bird flus into other species. Those risks of pandemic illness haven't gone away, and so we need an economic system that can cope with natural disasters, with the climate changes that are going to genuinely challenge infrastructure and business and life as we know it, business as we know it, certainly. Let's
move away from politics and end on something a little lighter. Certainly it's been a big talking point this week. The amendments to Roald Dahl's books to clean up some of the perhaps slightly dated language. Some people feel that that's just sanitising his work, but it seems that the Queen Consort has had a bit of influence here. Thomas, a quick thought from you on this.
Well, it's an unusual story because we'll talk maybe later on this morning about some of the involvement of the King potentially in some of this Brexit drama going on over the next couple of days. I was marginally surprised to hear the Queen, involved in any way in this. Largely, I'm of the opinion that in some ways, the less you hear from the monarchy on any issue on the front page, the better for the monarchy. The whole idea is they're meant to be above politics. This seems like an issue, and it is a genuine and an interesting discussion of freedom of freedom of speech. It's probably not one where if I was advising the Queen, I'd say that it would be a wise move to get involved.
Okay. And Marianne, a quick thought from you on this? Seems the Queen Consort is definitely flexing her muscles slightly.
Well, yeah, so she made a comment at the start of an online book club saying that she wanted authors to kind of hold true to their principles.
Okay.
And I say, yes, that's true, but the bottom line
Marianne, we're going to have to, I'm afraid, leave it there. Thanks very much, you both. See you in the next hour, and more coming up at the top of the hour.